The chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is seeking arrest warrants for some top Israeli and Hamas leaders. The proposed warrants are in connection with their actions in the war since the October 7th attacks. Among those named in the ICC request are Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The ICC chief prosecutor Karim Khan told CNN that his office requested the warrants based on evidence that suggests those named are responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Of course, hostages have not been released. That insidious crime, it continues for so many innocent Israelis that are in custody. Are held hostage by Hamas and families that are waiting for their return. And of course, we see pictures of starving children, of emaciated children. We have a variety of evidence to support, not polemics, but evidence that's been forensically analysed to sustain the charge also of starvation being used by Netanyahu and Gallant as a method of war, and it's awful.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told MSNBC that the International Criminal Court request draws a false equivalency between Israel and Hamas.
It's a rogue prosecutor who's out to demonize the one and only Jewish state, and he's doing that by first applying a false symmetry. He's equating Israel's democratically elected leaders with the terrorist tyrants of Hamas. That's like saying, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for, after 9/11, I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, but also for Osama bin Laden. And in World War II, I'm issuing arrest warrants for FDR, but also for Hitler.
Israel and the United States are not members of the ICC and do not recognize its jurisdiction. However, most countries, 124 of them, including Canada, are parties to the court's treaty. This means if the court issues arrest warrants, any country that is a member of the ICC would have to arrest them and extradite them to The Hague.
Obviously, the International Criminal Court is independent in its work, and I've said from the very beginning how important it is that everyone respect and abide by international law. What I will say is troubling, though, is the sense of an equivalency between the democratically elected leaders of Israel and the bloodthirsty terrorists that lead up Hamas.
For more on this, we're joined by Iddo Moed. He is Israel's ambassador to Canada. Ambassador, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You heard there the Prime Minister. We heard it from the Foreign Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, that Canada rejected the equivalency between Israel and Hamas that your government says is implied in these charges. But they did not condemn this move by the ICC the way people like U.S. President Joe Biden have done. What do you make of Canada's response to this?
I think that Canada has made the right decision to condemn the fact that there is this outrageous moral equivalency between a democratically elected government and a heinous terrorist organization. Hamas has set out to kill Israelis, as many as possible, to destroy Israel. We know Hamas's agenda, and the international community must act against Hamas. On the other hand, you have an Israeli government, a democratically elected government, a very robust legal system that works and has shown time and again that not only are we working against anybody who breaks law within Israel, but in real time, under combat, we are able to apply international law as no other military has been able to do in the world until now. So in our actions, we have shown that we are applying international law, and this sort of libel that the prosecutor, the ICC prosecutor, is trying to present against Israel is outrageous because it actually shows that the international law, the international system, law order-based system is actually crumbling. If that is the case, if you equate a terrorist organization with the government, when we have full evidence to show that there is no starvation, I think that you remember from the first time that you and I spoke about how Israel applies international law, that we are doing our utmost to make sure that the civilians are staying out of harm's way in any way, shape, or form. That is, that's military harm, that's food, that's water, that's anything that can be provided for their security and safety.
Okay, there's a few things to go through there, but I want to start with the moral equivalency argument. Is it moral equivalency to hold people on opposite sides of a conflict accountable for their own individual actions, in the abstract way? I mean, if in fact, if you read the indictment or read the request for the warrants from Karim Khan, the prosecutor, he makes the point that there is starvation happening in Gaza, that they've been denied food, they've been denied water, and he points to comments made by Mr. Gallant, the defense minister, who said he referred to Palestinians as human animals, saying we are fighting human animals and we will act accordingly. Is it moral equivalency to hold people accountable for their own actions?
So if you take a murderer and the victim, and you say, and the victim hits the murderer back, and the murderer is not able to kill the victim, would you hold both of them in the same balance? And you'll say, well, why did you hit your murderer? This is outrageous. This is using the same language that South Africa has been using in ICJ, to a sort of a blood libel against Israel, to blame us for for protecting ourselves, for fighting back against Hamas terrorist organization that uses humans as the population as human shields. We've shown that time and again that this is what they're doing. We have shown how we are operating on intelligence, and very meticulously and very slowly, so that we can retrieve our hostages, which, by the way, the prosecutor says they are held in custody by the Palestinians. I mean, just the choice of words showed it that this person has an agenda against Israel.
Well, what would his agenda be? I mean, we've seen Karim Khan. He's gone after Putin for what's happened in Ukraine. Why do you assume there's an anti-Israeli agenda?
Ask him, why didn't he go after Maduro in Venezuela? Just a question. He met with him. Just ask him that. I mean, this gentleman has some kind of an agenda which is against Israel. It's to pin this blind libel against us because he doesn't like Israel, he doesn't like Israel to exist. I don't know. I don't know what his agenda, but it's clearly he has an agenda, and that's evident. He's not been to Israel. He's not verified. Whatever he is stating, he has not been able to establish by himself. He's claiming he has proof. Israel has delivered 20,000 truckloads into Gaza, which amounts to 2 million tons of food supplies into the Gaza Strip. Israel has repaired the water pipes into the Gaza, to the northern part of the Gaza Strip. A long time ago, Israel is making sure that the Palestinian population is kept out of harm's way all the time and gets the food supplies that it needs all the time.
The allegation, though, in the documents filed by the ICC is that starvation is being used as a method of war, that including the denial of humanitarian relief supplies. And that's a big part of why he is seeking the warrants against your Prime Minister and your Defense Minister. So I know you say supplies are getting in and you say there is no famine there, but they say they have documented evidence, videos, and witnesses of starvation happening inside Gaza as a result of Israeli policies.
So he can use that wherever he wants. It's false. As we speak today, an hour ago, Israeli Defense Forces just released information about 650 tons of supplies, humanitarian supplies, sitting on the Palestinian side, waiting to be delivered to the Palestinians. That's an issue that's beyond Israel's control. This has been going on for a long time. We've been supplying food into the Gaza Strip. We've created more openings through the air, through the sea, and by land, through Ashdod port, from Jordan. So we've gone to enormous lengths to make sure that the Palestinian population stays out of harm's way. And why would we do that? Because we believe that at the end of the day, these will remain our neighbors. They are not the neighbors of the prosecutor. I'm sure that he will never even contemplate living in such a neighborhood. This is our neighborhood. And we want to make sure that we will be able to live with these populations side by side at some point in time. Right now, we have to retrieve 128 hostages still being held in tunnels underneath Gaza. We have to make sure that they stop shooting rockets and missiles into Israel, which they've been doing and continue to do all the time. And we have to remember that behind this is not just Hamas. We have the Hezbollah in the north. We're not talking about that, but they continue to shoot and destroy Israeli homes in the north. And Iran, of course, that is behind this whole scene, with other proxies in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and so on. So this is a very broad front that Israel is confronting. And what the prosecutor is trying to do is to tie Israel's hands behind its back while it's defending itself in what is the most important war we've been waging since our inception. I mean, just this atrocious attack by Hamas, as you know, the sheer number is unprecedented.
But the other number that has a lot of people alarmed, and which is what people like Karim Khan point to, is the number of casualties, civilian and combatant, inside Gaza. And I know when we've had these discussions in the past, there is rejection and disagreement of the numbers that come from the health ministry in there, because Hamas controls those institutions. So it is perhaps an unreliable indicator of where things stand. But your prime minister was on a podcast on the 12th of May, and he says there's at least 30,000 people who have been killed in Gaza since the war started. 14,000 combatants, he says, 16,000 civilians. 16,000 civilians. Using the Israeli prime minister's number, it's a staggering number when you think about it, and there may be more buried underneath the rubble.
There is no doubt about that.
And I know you say you've been careful as a military and taken precautions, but yet we still have a number that you and I both, as human beings, find pretty tough to stomach. So like, does that not feed into what we're seeing now with what Mr. Khan is doing and the criticism coming from other countries?
What Mr. Khan is doing is trying to prevent Israel from being able to defend itself. If anybody cares about humanitarian issues about lives, I would wonder how much this prosecutor would be involved in Sudan, where Palestinians, by the way, among others, were killed, or how much he was involved in other areas of parts of the world where thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands were killed. This is specifically against Israel. This is not a humanitarian issue in itself. I think that in his perspective, the numbers also don't matter if there would be 2 or 30,000. The numbers are horrific, and we spoke about that. Any casualty is horrific, again, because these people will remain our neighbors, and we don't want to kill them. But when we have this monster of a terrorist organization hiding behind civilians, killing thousands of Israelis, we have to defend ourselves. We cannot just wait for Mr. Khan to say, well, you know what, maybe we'll find another talk about it, or I don't know what. We have a situation that no other country in the world is facing. We're a small country. We have been able to establish peaceful relations with several Arab countries, with many more we will in the future, because we have very friendly relations. But behind the scenes, there is a terrorist organization supported by Iran, the Iranian regime, which wants to destroy Israel. And our neighbors realize that that's the case, and this is why they also understand that we are fighting against Hamas and not against the Palestinian population.
But just on that, Ambassador, and look, Hamas is a designated terrorist organization, you know, here in Canada, reviled around the world, and you know, they stand accused to the crimes they committed on October 7th. But my read of it is that Israel is not being accused, and Mr. Khan isn't taking this action because of the way the IDF has killed members of Hamas. It's those civilians, right? And the equivalency that Mr. Khan says he's trying to draw is between the value of the life of a Palestinian non-combatant civilian and an Israeli civilian. That's an equivalency that some organization needs to stand up for them in this situation. How do you respond to that idea that it's about those 16,000 non-combatants that your prime minister has said have been killed as a result of this?
We said it from the beginning. Any casualty, and you've heard me say that time and again, and I can show you numerous examples why Israeli soldiers were killed, because we preferred to have another type of operation to directly hit the terrorists and not to carpet bomb an area or a location. Because we understand it is our responsibility to live and abide by international law and by Israeli law, which is very strong and robust. And whoever crosses that line is held accountable.
But I wonder, Ambassadors, as a final point, I mean, there's been a recalibration of the military's approach in Gaza by the IDF. We've talked about this, and you know, as President Biden and others have talked to Prime Minister Netanyahu and says we need to see some changes in how you're doing this. The way things are being done now maybe aren't the way things were being done in October and being done in November, when we saw Defense Minister Gallant say a full siege, nothing gets in. You know, and we saw an approach there on the 8th of October, him saying that Gaza will be shut down. He compared the Palestinians who live there, to animals. I mean, do you think we could have gotten to the point where this many civilians are dead without something having happened there that violates the laws of war?
I think that when you want to understand what the law of armed conflict means, you will understand that civilians may get killed. It's an option. It's a possibility. We try, and everybody should try, according to the law, do its best to prevent that. But that's a possibility. That's an option. And I don't think that if you're talking about a ratio, have a look at other conflicts around the world. I think that the ratio is very different. It's completely upside down than what has happened with Israel and Hamas and the Palestinians in Gaza. We have proof to show how meticulous we've gone about fighting Hamas. Although they are hiding behind civilians, they are not wearing uniforms, they are abusing locations of hospitals, mosques, schools. You've shown those images yourself. You know that they are holding their own population hostage. And so, in spite of that, we have to pursue this war because we have to get our 128 hostages back. They're still held by Hamas. And we know that quite a number of them are not alive anymore, but we will do our whatever it takes to make sure that they come back home. This is the responsibility of the Israeli government, and this is what we'll do.
Ambassador Iddo Moed, difficult topics. I always appreciate your willingness to come in and have the conversation. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.